Welcome to the Fit Affiliate podcast, where we talk about behavior and behavior-based conversations as they relate to CrossFit affiliate owners and coaches. My name's Lisa Hetherington, and I'm your co-host. Sitting alongside me are Tony and Chuck, the founders of Fit Affiliate. And welcome back to another episode of the Fit Affiliate podcast. Didn't get the intro wrong. Joined again by the one and only Tony. How are you, good sir?
I am fantastic. I am in a different location, but I'm not in a dog cage, so we're going to go with that as good news.
That is good news. That is good news. I mean, we did enjoy the cage as a backdrop, but this is nice as well. So today,
Beatrice does have a swollen mouth today. I got here this morning, and her face looks like she got stung by a bee, but it's not going to result in me being in a cage. Anyway, carry on.
Okay, poor little thing. She's really having a bad trot. I was watching Dottie actually chase a wasp the other day. Went, this is going to end badly.
Yeah, no.
And
she was chewing on a bone, I think, and she did something to her mouth. So now,
yes,
back to the vet we go.
Back to the vet. Your besties. So today I thought we would talk about the freedom of time. We have our 4 freedoms that we focus on with clients, with freedom of purpose, relationships, time, and money. But I think time is very appropriate at the moment, given that looking at the socials and that, what I've seen from our Fit Affiliate clients is everyone's like, I don't have enough time, and I'm don't have time to get all the things done that I want to get done. I don't have time, and feeling pressured. And I think that's an important one for us, because I think that's one of the first things we focus on with our clients is, aiming for the freedom of time. So I thought that would be fun for us to ramble on about today.
Okay, you ramble. I'll fill in.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think, one of the big things that we hear a lot is, and really honestly, even in conversations we've had with HQ, is just, how do we define a successful affiliate, right? What are the metrics that define a successful affiliate? And it's clearly not money, because depending on where you live and in your needs and your wants and all those things, like that plays a role on it. So it can't be like $1 million affiliate. I mean, for one, that'd be incredibly mimetic. And I apologize if you can hear the dogs snoring, because they're both just ripping it right now.
Okay.
But so it's not money. It's not the size of your team. It's not the number. There's Dickie back there. It's not the number of clients you have. It's not a lot of things, right? But it is a handful of a few different things. And so, for us, really, it was the thing that built this company, which was, how do we come in and first and foremost define fitness, right? Like, because that's really what this is about, is, what is fitness in an affiliate, or how do we define that? And it's one of those things where I think it is so overlooked or glossed over or passed by as it applies to fitness itself, which is, that CrossFit elegantly and eloquently defined what is fitness, right? Like, that's one of those things where I think if you've done CrossFit for a number of years, you've forgotten what it's like to be lost inside a Globo gym and just pursuing and doing things, and like probably flipping through pages in Men's Health or Googling things, or like following an influencer and being like, and to be completely lost in it. And I think we talked about this in the last podcast we recorded, which was exactly that, like just how good you have it through CrossFit. In terms of that, fitness is so easily defined: work capacity, broad times, modal domains, period. Anything that improves that, keep doing. Anything that doesn't, and to what degree, stop. Right. Yep. And so when Fit Affiliate was built, that was essentially the big conversation, which was like, how do we, define that fitness? How do we clarify that down to a distinguishable, identifiable, repeatable, observable, a quantifiable metric of fitness? And that's really where the 4 freedoms came from, because it doesn't really matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter really how big your team is, how many clients you have. The point of all businesses, and this is not unique to affiliates, this is the point of whether you're a tech startup, a dentist's office, you name it, they're all the same thing. The point of any business is to improve the quality of life of the business owner, period. Right. So when we started the company, those are the 4 metrics of fitness: freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of purpose, freedom of relationship. Freedom of purpose and relationship, I think, are the ones that people don't really ever pay attention to because they're the hardest ones to realize. But we've talked enough on this podcast to know that like they're probably the two most important ones, because like all the time and all the money don't matter without the relationships, without the purpose. But
Mm.
um, with the work that I do with other business owners, other entrepreneurs outside the affiliate landscape, they are uniquely just as disadvantaged as affiliate owners, right? If you give
Mm.
me 10 entrepreneurs, affiliate owners or otherwise, 11 of them tell me they don't have enough time, right?
Mm.
Like, period. So clearly we've missed something in the metric of fitness there, right? As it applies to all businesses, not just affiliates, and which is that like, if the point is to improve the quality of life, uh, time is going to probably be like the biggest currency that you can amass more than anything. Because
Mm.
like all the money in the world does you no good if you have no time to enjoy it, right? Like
Mm.
all the money and all the time in the world does you no good if you don't have the relationships to share it. All the time and all the money and all the relationships in the world do you no good if you don't have the purpose to pursue to make it all worth it. And so they're
Mm.
all correlative and they all work together. But freedom of time is hands down the most important one that people are unfortunately always willing to sacrifice.
Yep. And I think it's, you know, we can get, I think as humans, but speaking as affiliate owners, we're addicted to doing the things, and you're told for so often in life you've got to be, if you're not busy, well, you can't be working. Like that's, if you're not hustle and grind and all the rest of that stuff. But even when we've seen affiliate owners build a good team, they still say they've got no time. They've still got all these things to do. It's like, but you've handed off 90% of what you had 6, 8 months ago. What It's because we don't want to take ourselves out of the way. It's a little bit of ego and we're stuck, but we're addicted to doing things because that's the story we've been sold.
Yeah, I think it goes a couple of different ways. A lot of it I think plays on most on insecurity.
Mm.
The average entrepreneur, not just an affiliate owner, is scared, right? Like they have
Mm.
everything tied up into this. And so in a perfect world, if it doesn't go well, you got nothing, right? Like
Mm.
I think it's a lot easier for people to understand this conceptual notion of freedom of time when it applies to I work a job, right? Because
Mm.
in that job, everybody's after this central sort of like future fantasy, which is retirement. Right? Like
Mm.
I'm going to work, I'm going to put in my time, I'm going to amass my pension, and then I'm going to be done. And I'm going to spend my golden years finally getting to do what I want to do
Mm.
with who I want to do it and when. Well, as it applies to business owners, entrepreneurs, affiliate owners, whatever, it's a little bit different because you're actually already retired, right? In many
Mm.
ways, and that really what retirement means is essentially sort of that freedom of purpose to be able to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, with who you want to do it, and where, right?
Mm.
I would assume, I would assume the business that you own, that you've invested in, that you've started, is something that you want to do with who you want to do it, where you want to do it, and when you want to do it. Otherwise, you probably could just go start another business. But as it
Mm.
applies to affiliate owners, I know that to be true. And like that's
Mm.
this most people own affiliates not because they thought that it was going to be the greatest new tech startup that was going to change the world. They were going to become loaded. They all started doing it because they love doing it. Right. And
Mm.
so that's off the table already because now you're basically already retired. Now, sure, you don't have a pension and you haven't like, sunset yourself to go off to do whatever you want. But like of time is often a very hard thing to understand because where the central confusion starts from is that they actually like what they do,
Mm.
right? So they're like,
Mm.
well, if I wasn't doing this, what would I be doing? And that's a good conversation to have because
Mm.
you have to start there. And that's usually where we start with most of the clients. Like freedom of time is not just inherently like just give you days off, right? Like give you
Mm.
vacation time or otherwise. Freedom of time is essentially your ability to be intentional with your time.
Mm.
And to understand all the four freedoms, I think we have to start there first, which is like, what does freedom really actually mean? Because freedom in and of itself seems to suggest an absence of responsibility, and that's not the case, right? Like, freedom is actually the intentionality of responsibility, right? Like
Mm.
the things that I do for this specific thing, this freedom. And I think that especially like in America where we throw the F word around all the time, right? Like, people don't really understand what freedom. They just think that like just means that like I could do what I want. Like you
Mm,
can't govern me or like whatever. But that's not really it. Freedom in America even is like you got to do the right thing for the right people for the right reasons that you can enjoy those freedoms, right? Like
mm, yep.
so I think that in order for people to understand what freedom means, whether it be time, money, relationship, or purpose, they have to understand like what freedom looks like. And that
Mm,
means like you have to be intentional, you have to be deliberate, and you have to be unwavering in those pursuits because that's what affords you the freedom. It's not just like I want you
mm,
to take a week off or a month off or like go do something else
mm,
with your time and like go sit on a beach because that's usually the primary reason. Everybody's like, I don't really need freedom of time because like I don't hate what I do.
mm. And it's you're right. It's about being intentional and having the luxury of choice. Is this is how I'm choosing to invest my time and or my energy in this relationship, or you know have choices about what I do with finances, or you know with that time is like, okay, well, what am I going to intentionally do rather than just chase, as I've often come up in my coaching calls, chasing squirrels around in circles, because it's just busy work and chasing shiny objects because it can make us feel a bit productive when we're not actually feeling the thing underneath, whether it's overwhelm or whatever we're avoiding.
Hmm.
Mm.
I think masturbation.
Yeah.
Um, you know, a lot of it for a lot of us, we can look at institutional failures, right? Where it's like, we were convinced or we were groomed or we were conditioned or all these things into like work ethic, but
Mm,
it might be as insidious as that. It's just really that what it means to grow up means to essentially be um, governed, right? It means that like expectations were very clear, like it was
mm,
fairly rigid. Like you went to school at a certain time, you left school, like you probably had chores or you had things like that. And so the vast majority of like your formative years were militant, right? Like they
mm,
just kind of like even if you didn't like doing it, you still knew that like I gotta go to bed at 9, I gotta go to school at
mm,
7, like it just was what it was. And then you get dropped into adulthood. Even if like, you did follow the conventional path, you went to school and you got a job, but like now all of a sudden you're just equipped to do whatever you want to do, right? And so I think
mm,
that in many ways, most people seek to try to get back to childhood, to get to some degree of like structure or rigidity
mm,
that they were otherwise used to appreciating or having, because it's a lot like we talk about this in relationships, but the, the the thing that everybody seeks in a relationship is to finish childhood, right? Like that's
mm,
who we're seeking to mate. And it's kind of the same thing with life. I think that in terms of like your time, your career, and your pursuits of time, I think we really just seek to finish childhood. And so I think that in a lot of ways, that's a very big psychological conversation there. But that's, I think, one of the big hurdles that most people have when it's like, uh, freedom of time seems like a nightmare because like, I don't even know what to do with myself. And as humans, we are predisposed to love expectations. I mean, we try to reject them and say that we don't, but like any
mhm,
relationship that goes well is a relationship that has clear expectations, right? Whether
mm.
that be professional or personal or, even platonic.
Yep. And we were talking about this actually on the MDCP podcast this week, episode dropping soon, about, you
Good
know,
plug. Well done.
yeah, very smooth, I thought. But about setting, when you are trying to communicate value, for example, to a client, you're selling them a package or whatever, and they come back at the end of it and go, yeah, I want my money back because I didn't get what I thought I was going to get. It's like I didn't get enough personal attention or whatever. And it's like setting the expectations very clearly up front, as well as asking them, what do you expect? What is your expected outcome? How do you think this is going to look? So that you can make sure that there's that clarity in there, rather than just, oh, we're just going to wing it, see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of finishing that other conversation, right? Which is like understanding really the thing that we're all actually after. And as it applies to this industry, this business, in the business that most of, I guess, the audience is in, is fitness. Um, it's really even bigger than fitness, though, right? Like the one thing that
mm,
all things sell is time. That's it,
mm,
right? And so in fitness, it's essentially how much of my life do I have to give up to achieve the result that I'm after, the goal, etc. And can you
mhm,
make that enticing? But really specifically, I'm willing to pay you more and more money if you can show me a return faster and faster and faster. Okay,
mm,
like if you can decrease time to my intended result, you're worth a lot
mm.
more to me, right?
Yep.
But that's the same thing that happens in other things, right? When you buy a
Mm,
house, conventionally, most people look at those houses in terms of how much of my life am I going to have to give up to afford this house, right? Like how
mm,
many years am I going to have to pay for this? How hard am I going to have to work? How much of a struggle? How much stress is that mortgage payment going to be? How much of my life is it going to consume paying for this thing? The car,
mm,
the relationship, the friendships, all those things
mm,
are essentially a time arbitrage conversation. And so that's all value is. It's
mm,
essentially your understood establishment or your understood appreciation of how much time you're willing to invest in this thing for it to be worth it to you. And
mm.
in exchange, I'll agree to give you that much money to match it.
Which is, a big thing, I guess, as affiliate owners to think about is, how much time am I where we can fall in the trap is like, how much time am I willing to give to this thing? So we give everything to it because
Mhm.
it's everything to us, but that return on investment is slower to generate because we're just like not doing maybe the more pulling the more important levers or the more powerful levers rather just, spending our time patting down fires all around us.
Yeah, like so in order for the reason why freedom of time, money, purpose, and relationship are actually the metrics of success is again, it's not because we want you to just have carte blanche, open ended access to them. It's that, like anything, it's the intentionality of responsibility. So by being responsible to time, money, purpose, and relationship, you're also developing an appreciation for those things. And
Mm,
as such, when you develop that appreciation, you develop value for those things, right? And so one of the big problems that faces most affiliates is the commoditization conversation. They themselves devalue the very service that they sell for two reasons. One, they're willing to give of their time open ended to it. So it's not terribly value in terms of the time arbitrage conversation. And two,
mm,
they have given so much of their time to it, they're in the same position as their prospects are. So they tend to devalue it a lot more. It's not that they don't love CrossFit because they do. It's just that for them, it's a very different relationship now. I mean, you're
mm,
handful of years into this. And so the time, it's a sunk cost fallacy. You've already spent that money, so you forgot what it's like. And that's the case with anything. Like anybody who
mm,
spends a bunch of money, and when they spend the money, it's painful, but almost
mm.
instantly that pain begins to dissipate. And it's the same thing that
Yep.
ends up happening when you invest your time into something like fitness. If you remember what it was like when you weren't fit and someone told you that you needed to get fit, you could just
Mm,
simply think to yourself that, like, this is going to take me months, years, decades, and that sucks, right?
yep.
That's the investment. But then you start spending the time, and instantly it just starts to get easier and easier and easier,
Mm,
right? And so the reason why freedom of time becomes so important is exactly that. Until you learn to, be responsible to time and appreciate time and respect time, you're never going to understand how much it's worth, and you're never going to
mm,
learn how to sell time.
mm. And helping our clients and prospects understand it from, that value perspective and that value conversation, but also, you know, what is more time worth to you? If you knew that we could, you know, get you to X point sooner, like what does that really mean to you? But people don't really have a concept of that either. They're just like, oh, I just got it quicker. They don't have a concept of the true value of that overall impact to everything in their life.
Yeah, I mean, we essentially we overvalue yesterday
Mm,
and devalue today and take tomorrow for granted, right? Like that's
mm,
just the central sort of human fault point. It's the central failure. And really what that comes down to is that we don't value time until it's gone.
mm,
Right? Like there's not a single person who sits at at their deathbed. This is going to break me. There's not a single person who sits at their deathbed and doesn't wish they had more back,
mm,
right? And there's not a single person who sits there, hopefully, or unhope, or maybe not, but like who doesn't appreciate all the relationships they've had and the time that those people have spent in their life, right?
mm,
So it's interesting and weird to think that as humans we just don't value when we have it, right? But I guess
mm.
it's the lottery sort of problem.
Yeah.
Like if I just had more money, money wouldn't matter.
Mm.
Like
And
not the
how many
case.
lottery winners wind up back to where they were within a very relatively
Yeah.
short space of time?
And it's weird because as humans, we just don't understand that you're never gonna get today back
Mm,
or tomorrow or the next day, right?
mm,
Like that is time spent. This is days
mm,
spent, months
mm,
spent, weeks spent. And personally, that was why it was so important to me when we started the company that like freedom of time was a thing. It wasn't because we wanted to sell somebody
mm.
this dream of passive revenue and some
Days
whatever
off
some
by the beach.
yeah. I mean, I do want you to take days off by the beach, but like that's only for your own personal growth. But
Yeah.
that's a different podcast altogether. Maybe not the beach. Beaches are
Mm,
boring, but that's my opinion. Go to the mountains. But um, it was really that I wanted everybody to understand that like you don't have time.
mm,
None of us do. And it's not
mm,
meant to scare you and it's not meant to terrify anybody, but like meditating on your own mortality, I think is a very valuable thing for most people to do because it inherently lets you budget, right? It lets
mm,
you really truly do an audit, so to speak, an accumulation and an estimation of like, are you living the way that you would like to,
mm,
knowing that you're not going to do it forever. And
mm,
most people aren't willing to do that for one reason, because they know the answer.
mm,
They're not.
mm,
And that to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're literally in control of it, right? It's your business. You invested, you started it, you built it, and you can do it any way you want to do. So I would really appreciate it if you all would actually like love what you do and take your time seriously,
mm.
not just give
A-
away free.
And I think that we get, because we're so busy stomping out fires around us, it's very easy to lose sight of loving what you do. It
Mm,
becomes something that I'm investing this time and energy in this thing, and people don't appreciate me, and it doesn't pay me, and it doesn't do the things. So it becomes then that, when you do have that opportunity that maybe you have some, freedom of time, is like, cool, you won't see me for 2 weeks. If I don't have to be here, I'm not going to be here, which is kind of, you know, running too far in the other direction.
mm,
It's, you know, but when you get to that stage of, hating what you've built simply because you feel unappreciated, and, you haven't had time, you haven't created the time and space to focus on your why and focus on, keep those things in mind. It makes it really hard that you feel like you're just trading not even time for dollars, you're just trading time for cents in some cases.
if you're lucky, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
even IOUs, like checks in the
Yeah.
mail. Uh, hopefully it doesn't get lost. Put the right postage on it. Anybody first class? Um, yeah, it's a very hard conversation only for a few different reasons. And if I ask most people to define wealth, right? Like,
Mm,
give me an example of wealth. Unfortunately, it's going to likely be some degree of mimetic goals, which we talk about a lot on here, but it's going to be like
mm,
$1 million, $5 million, $10 million, some degree
mm,
of perspective or perception as it to this amount of money that's going to equivocate or correlate to
mm,
this perceived quality of life. Um, but upon further investigation, when I asked them, tell me what $5 million is going to do for them and what that's going to look like it doesn't really correlate because we
mm,
end up doing is essentially then further detailing that like wealth looks like possessions, material goods, right? Like it looks like
mm.
bigger house or a better house or toys or things like that. And there's nothing wrong with those things. I'm not saying
mm,
that there is, but people, we've all heard the old adage: the things that we own end up owning us, right? Like, and
mm,
so what you find is that in many cases, if not all cases, that those luxuries, those material possessions that we pursue them for an absence of why. When the
mm,
absence of why, what's become wise? Right? And so
mm,
most people are proudly carrying around their Birkin bag and they're driving around in their Range Rovers and they're pulling into their McMansions, not because they're not important to them, but it's because they've turned those what's into whys, right? Like those
mm.
have become, I work very hard for these reasons. This is my why. And I'm like, we're gonna have a hard time here, Ted, because I'm not sure those are they're given back to you, right? But
Mm,
if you once you find people, later in life or people who have become truly wealthy, they'll all tell you the same thing. It's how I spend my time.
yep.
That's it. Right? Like that is the central sort of definition of wealth. Any of them is that it's
Mm,
how I spend my time.
mm,
And really what you have to understand is that if things are taking of your time or asking of your time, or you're being asked to spend your time, that's the absence of wealth. That's the opposite of wealth, right? Because like that's a debt. That's a debit.
mm,
That's taking from you. And
mm,
so real wealth is your ability to always invest your time in things. And so freedom of time is exactly that. It's your ability to invest your time into things and not spend your time on things.
mm, mm. And that's a really important differentiation. I'll get the words out eventually. Um,
It is like
but
two of the most for you. So
yeah, it is. But now I've lost my track. There it is. I've got it back. So you and I had a conversation recently when I was planning some goals, and one of my goals was to not have financial stress. And you were like, What is that? Like, what does that look like?" It's like that's a very, vague thing. And it was like, well, just have enough money that we don't have to stress. And one of the questions you asked me, which, caused us to think hard on it, was like, what is enough? And then that really got us thinking about, well, what does matter to us? Here in my relationship is, quality. We don't need things. It's not about things. It's about, you know, the quality of our time and relationship and connections. That's what actually, and experiences that support that, not just, well, I've got a minimum level in the bank of 5K or whatever. I'd never drop below that. Well, that's good for you, but what does that actually, do you spend your entire time fixated that I'm getting close to that line or that number or, all that sort of stuff? And it was a really powerful discussion on reframing it to, well, what are you investing yourself into?
hmm.
So, and that led to a lot of discussions at home where because we're not really driven by things, we don't need a lot of stuff. And it's like, well, what does financial security look like? And what do we want our life to look like if we achieve that? Like, what will it be? Well, what's my work look like? What's my purpose look like? Like, I'm not just going to sit around all day and contemplate my navel. Like, there always
I
has
mean,
to
if
be a
that's the
purpose.
thing, so be it.
Yeah, but it really led me down a path of thinking, okay, well, what is my purpose? Like, why am I doing what I do?
Hmm.
And if what's going to fill me with joy moving forward, rather than just I'm just doing this thing because that's what I've got to do. Um, yeah. What would you do if you could do anything?
Ooh, that's a profound question, isn't it?
Hmm.
To which most people would say they don't know, right? And like
Yeah.
that's a sad reality for many people, and really, truly, for many very successful people. Like, um, there. This is all very omnipresent in my life at the moment, so I'm trying to
Mm,
avoid giving personal examples at the moment. But the thing is with anything, right? Starting back with what is an investment, right?
mm,
It's the intended input with an expected output, right? Like I'm going to give of something with the intention of receiving something, whether that be money or whatever. I
mhm,
think that we tend to think about that word in terms of financial, but it can be a lot of different things. But really the main difference is that much like, financial, there's basically assets and there's liabilities. The same can be said with
Mm,
your life. And unfortunately, most people just don't really know the difference between what is an asset, what's a liability as it applies to their life. I think that
mm,
most people get up and go to work every day, and they spend their time working in exchange for a paycheck, and then there's a belief that, like, in exchange for that later on, I'm going to be able to afford,
mm,
this life that I want, and they're not they're not that unique in the fact that they find themselves at that endpoint unable to do exactly that for two reasons. One, they probably have not amassed what they needed to amass because they had no real
mm,
idea what that was going to take. And two, they moved the goalpost, right? Like,
mm,
life changes, people change, et cetera. And so, like, when it comes down to it, you're like, I didn't set that up. And so, you
mm,
know, back to what really matters, which is businesses and specifically affiliates, is that, like, you know, you own your business, but if you're not very careful, it's going to end up owning you. And
mm,
the only difference in that is intention.
mm.
If
And
you're not clear on that, you're screwed.
yep, totally. And I remember also us having a conversation in one of my coaching calls about, you know, blocking out your calendar and making sure you're getting some things done, but understanding that, you know, rather than being so specific as going, okay, well, I've got to ring leads, I've got to do prospects. And then I was like, well, I don't have time to learn this or I don't have time to learn about that. But understanding that, you know, blocking out time and calling it, for example, growth activities means I could read that book or I could read, this blog or I could listen to this podcast because that's going to help me learn skills and knowledge. So it's an investment in that. And I remember that conversation being quite powerful as like, and using that term investment because it really stuck out to me as like, that's an investment in moving your business forward, not just sitting on the phone ringing people. Like this is increasing your skill set so you can do XYZ better.
Mhm.
So that because I would often feel like, well, if I read a book for an hour, that feels like a waste of time. And you're like, but is it? Like,
Yeah.
if you're reading Mary Poppins, maybe, but if that's your designated time to develop skills and knowledge, then read a book, listen to a book, read a blog, listen to a podcast, all those things fit under that criterion, and it's okay to do that, and that
Yeah.
makes you a more well-rounded person where you're not just focused on all the little what's like I need to make 50 phone calls today, I need to set 3 appointments, I need to, you know, change the toilet paper, like all that sort of stuff. It can be hard to give yourself permission to do that, but when you understand it from the term of reference of an investment, then you go, "Ah, it's much easier to do those things."
Mhm.
And you start to look forward to those activities.
You know, I don't really like money. I think money's fascinating because to me, money is the one of the greatest oculus into human behavior, because that's really
Mm,
all money is. It's a demonstration of belief in a financial exchange. Um, and I like it for that reason. But what's fascinating about money in general is that, the beliefs people hold around it,
mm,
scarcity, abundance, etc. And why that's important in this conversation, if you think about money in terms of, like, accumulation, right? Like, one fascinating thing to do with most people is ask them exactly what I asked you, Rick. Okay,
mm,
what's the goal? What's the end point, right? And then
mm,
if they know, it's likely some loosely formed round number that they've never had before, that seems like a good number, that no doubt about it,
mm,
their life would probably be better if they had it versus not having it. But they can't really tell me any degree of certainty or specificity as to what that's going to do, right? Like, okay, so it's $5 million. What's that look like?
mm,
How many dollars a
mm,
week? How many dollars an hour? How many dollars a month? What are you buying? What are you enjoying? What are you appreciating? What are you driving
mm,
around? What do you live in? What, like, they're like, well, I know that I make 50 grand a year now. So if I had 5 million, I could live for X amount of years. I'm like, well, that's getting closer, but, like, what does living look like? What does that mean?
mm,
Like, are we talking about are we just talking about, like, sustaining, or are we talking about thriving, right? Because, like, are
mm,
you thriving at 50K? Probably not, right? Like, and if you were thriving, what does that look like? And then what they all end up coming up to the realization is that, like, it's never been about money, it's been about the time.
mm,
They're afraid that without money, they don't have time, right? Because then they're gonna have
mm,
to they're so used to giving of their time to things, they can't really possibly fathom, like, that they would have time, and they wouldn't need money.
mm,
So the same thing kind of happens in with it as it applies to time. And so, like, what is freedom of time? And like, what does that actually
mm,
look like for
mm,
most people? And it's exactly what we've been talking about, which is you define that, right? It's you're the one that determines what that looks like. But for me, it's my ability to do what I want to do when I want to do it with who I want to do it and where, right? Like, and
mm,
where that return on investment becomes very important is like being able to be here in this room at this point when nobody else can be, right? Like,
mm,
that's me spending and using and leveraging my freedom of time, right? Like, but it's also, more importantly, it's the things that I do every single day. And it's
mm,
the ability for me to get up and get to work at 5 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning. And by get to work, I mean like get to my table, right? Like, and be done by noon if I want to be done. And it's my
mm,
ability to go skiing when I want to ski and bike when I want to bike. And like, those do seem like they are somewhat whimsical in absence of responsibility, but they're very intentional.
mm,
And and that's the difference. I don't have to spend my time. I can invest it. And for me,
mm,
that is a very foundational shift. And as it applies to wealth, it's not about, for me, that's not a conversation of amassing millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Like, those are all great things and they're very helpful because like they make the things that you intend to do much more fun. But
yeah,
it's more so like, what's the point of having 10, 15, $20 million if you have to go to work, right? So that people tend to try to
mm,
commingle those two things, that like, I'm going to save up the money and then I'm going to have to be able to spend my time however I want to. But
mm,
what you will find is what everybody else finds is that if you're not very clear and you're not very intentional with what you want for your time, you
mm,
will spend your time now and you will spend your time later.
yep. And it's understanding like what brings you joy, what you're passionate about, what fills your cup, and directing your energies into that space rather than just I'm just doing the thing I thought I was meant to be doing.
Mhm.
Like it's weird for me now. Like outside the affiliate, I actually have less income than I did in the affiliate, and I used to be stressed about income. But now I have that freedom of time of like, if Sharon's working away for 3 days, I can just take my laptop and my notepad and my iPad and I can work. Like I can just go, yeah, cool, I'll come with you. Like, let's just book a flight, let's go. Whereas, or if, mum needs something or, I need to take care of the dog, like I have that capacity now and I'm not as stressed by the idea of not having income because I have less things that demand I might have had more income, but I had more things asking for a share of that income. And it's really helped me feel that whole freedom of like I can do, like you said, what I want with who I want when I want, doing the things that we want to do. I don't have to be thinking, yeah, I could agree to this, but then someone will probably call in sick, so I'll probably have to work anyway and cancel it. Like it's it's a much richer place to be. And you can achieve that within the affiliate. You don't have to be outside the affiliate to get that. But for me, that's been my experience is like, we ask the question, if I don't do this thing, what am I supposed to be? And that I struggle with that for quite a long time is like, because my identity was so closely tied to that. But now it's like, oh, you can have this freedom that you are looking for outside this vehicle
Mhm.
and experience that. And I think that's where I really got the lessons about the time and the investment and it's shaking off the burden of the limiting beliefs around money as well.
I mean, probably if there was one thing that's probably the thing that happens with every single one of the clients, it's the reversal from reaction to intention in all areas, right? But this is
Mm,
exceptionally profound as it applies to time, because
mm,
time is the universally just wasted aspect of life in general. And for me, when we built the company, it was very clear that like I wanted to build something not because it made a bunch of money, but something that I was proud of, and something
mm,
that I knew was helping. And the easiest way for me to know that that was the case was that like it was giving people their life back. And so
mm,
without discussing and caring about and preaching about freedom of time, like, you're just going to give people something to and waste their time on again, right? And so when we
mm,
built the whole company, one of the reasons why we were so adamant against advice and programs and things of that nature was that, like, I couldn't guarantee that I could come up with a universal solution that wasn't going to prevent you from just wasting your time on.
mm,
But I was 100% certain that you to
mm,
only investing your time and not spending it. And that was why the
mm,
company was built the way that it was exactly that, which was to, like, I want to give people their life back, not get them to invest their life into something that I created, built, and put online to sell them for a few $100s a week or a month.
mm,
And maybe it does help them, but to what end, right? And again, back to the original conversation, which is like, this is the fitness of business. Anything
mm,
that you do in fitness must improve your work capacity across broad times and modal domains. Anything you
mm,
do in business must increase your time. If it's taking of your time, it's not worth it.
mm.
Change the
And
dose.
we talk about that as entrepreneurs, that we have the ability to create unlimited revenue. Like we can create money out of thin air, and like I've done it, and it was a mind blowing concept at first, but it's the same with our time. We can create more time for ourselves by being that intentional and really understanding what it is that we want to do or why it is we want to do it. And it doesn't
Freedom is
align.
offense. It's not
Sorry.
defense. Like,
Mm,
that's really all it comes down to, is that most people think that, like, time or money, for example, like to your point just now, is that, like, freedom of money is going to come from amassing a bunch of money and then protecting it, keeping it,
mm,
and then preserving it to the point where then I can choose to use it. But then you're
mm,
going to bring that scarcity mindset with you all the way up until the end. And then, like, you
mm.
know, the easiest way to lose money is to try to keep it, right? It's like the
Yep.
old adage of sand in your palm. The tighter you grip it, the more it pushes through your fingers. And it's the same
Mm,
thing, with money. But freedom of money, freedom of time, purpose, relationship is essentially the exact opposite. It's offense, it's intention, again, to use that word, but it's that freedom of money is not about how much money you have, it's how much time you have to put into making it, right? So if you can
mm,
create money out of thin air at any time you want, that's freedom of money. It has nothing to do with how much money's in the bank, right?
mm,
Freedom of time is the exact same thing. It's essentially your ability to invest your time, not have to spend your time.
mm,
And I think these are the things that people don't understand. Like, I was on a call with one of the clients uh, a couple of days ago or yesterday. Actually, I don't even know what day it is anymore. But and it was, around the same thing. And he had moved out of the city and was living life in basically the countryside, but still had the gym in the city, and it was many hours away. And ultimately, his primary objective at this point is to get himself out of that, right, and
mm,
to have a succession. And you know, at first glance, he gave me a whole bunch of reasons as to what still needs to be done, this, that, and the other thing. And then, upon prying and pushing and provoking and prodding, we realized that, like, there's really not a whole lot. And the thing that is actually there is that he's there, right? And he wants to be
mm,
there. Not necessarily wants, but feels like he needs to be there. And so,
mm,
on accident, he has found himself in a situation where he could be free.
mm,
He would have been able to be intentional with his time, but he's creating situations that are forcing him to be reactive of his time, because he's creating these false scenarios that force him to continue to create busy work and tasks and things of that nature, so he can prove that he is, in fact, still valuable and still working and still
Still
and
needed.
still present, right, and still needed. But the truth of the matter is that all objective metrics suggest that he doesn't need to be there. And in fact,
Mm,
maybe even by being there, he's actually impeding other people's ability to grow into those roles. And so
mm,
I say that, in this call, because affiliate owners are really, really close to freedom of time, like as
mm,
close as you could probably ever get, much closer than, like, somebody who's building an app in a tech startup, right? Like, they have to build and
mm,
build and build and build and build and create, and, like, they're working. But, like, the very nature of what happens in an affiliate really just gets you, all you need to do is understand leverage, whether it be
mm,
basically people leverage or financial leverage or tech leverage. You're very close. And it's a very different reality to want to be someplace versus
mm,
need to be someplace. And that's kind of the central reframe of freedom of time, is that I'm where I want to be, not where I need to be, anytime I
Mm.
choose to be there.
Yeah, and I think, when we ask affiliates up front when they first come in for an initial, like, consult chat, it's, the magic wand conversation, and we've talked about that on this podcast. What would you, do if you could do anything, if everything went right? And I remember in mine, I said, "Well, yeah, I still wanna coach, but I wanna be able to pick and choose when I'm there, not know that I'm on call 24/7, but have to be there." It's like, you know, if I could just walk in and, shake hands and high five and kiss babies, then I feel like that at a time that I choose for something that I need, then I feel like that's success to me.
Mhm.
And, when I had that for a period when I had a really good team, it was like I actually felt useless. And that's when I fell in that trap of like, I don't even think I'm needed anymore in my gym. And so then I started creating problems for me to solve, which is where we got into
Yeah.
the squirrel discussion.
I mean, the bottom line is it's okay for you to not know what success looks like. Most people
Mm,
don't. And you're going to come into your call and you're probably going to have no idea. I'm going to ask you what it looks like and you're going to tell me what it doesn't look like, right? Like,
mm,
and that's okay. We all have to start someplace. And what's most important about this is that yours doesn't look like mine. Mine doesn't look like yours, and it doesn't look
mm,
like Lisa's. And that's what makes it so important, is that you don't end up trying to buy somebody else's version of success. You don't try to buy somebody else's version of freedom. You buy
mm,
your version and you define it and you protect it, and you never ever waver from it. Because once you understand freedom of time, and once you understand the value of your time, and once you understand the freedom of being able to invest your time in only the things in which you want to work on when you want to work on them, you will not compromise on that. And when you get to
mm,
that point, and you're not that far from that point, when you get to that point, you will sell your time for so much more money. And
mm.
then the whole thing becomes self reinforcing, because then you're just like, wow, this is
Yeah.
great.
And it is like understanding that, if you're growing and molding and shaping your thing the way that you want it to be, the way that it works for you, that's powerful rather than you buy a cookie cutter template of like, here, do these things, and then you spend your time, shaving, cutting, trimming, trying to fit that square peg into a round hole, going, well, it has to fit because this is the best way to do it. Apparently, how that actually takes you further away from that ideal that we were talking about, and the ability to create that dream.
You got to know your own dream, or otherwise you're going to
Mm,
try to build somebody else's, and then you're going to end up being a slave in someone else's dream, and don't be surprised.
yep. Well, that seems like a good note to end that one on. Thank you for investing your time each week on this and investing your time with me each week. I enjoy these, and it's a
An
nice little
exponential
segue there.
reach conversation.
Yeah, it's ripples,
I can spend
but
1 hour with you that affects thousands of hours for other people.
yeah, look at that. We're a good investment, good quality. But who wouldn't want to spend an hour with us? I mean, really, what
True.
can I say? But thank you for your time, and I look forward to the next one.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, my friend, for listening to the Fit Affiliate podcast. If you would be interested in hopping on a free call with us to just kind of chat about what you think your problems are and what you think the gap is between where you're at and where you want to go, we can see if maybe we can help you along that journey, figure out if we're all a good fit to do some sweet things together. So click the link, set up a consult. Let's help you identify some problems that we can mutually solve.